Happened to everybody?
Yeah, it sounds a little fishbowl-y, I think.
Is there any way to adjust that? Maybe Sam, can we mute the room? Oh, there you go. Sam's on it. Never mind. Didn't even have to say it. Thank you, Sam.
With that, of course, is I'll have to unmute whenever anybody speaks in the room. So make sure you get my attention if you want to speak.
Okay, great. Well, that'll help with taking turns then too, and we won't miss anything you all say in the room. Thank you, Sam, and thank you for recording. Just making sure everybody knows that this is being recorded. And I'll go ahead and get your September meeting started. Thanks for being here. There are some new members, so I'm really looking forward to the introductions. We'll get through a little bit of business in the beginning. Oh, sorry about that. All right. Can everyone see the screen okay? Alice, I can tell you're unmuted. Can you see it all right? Okay, great. So please mute yourself if you are not sharing, and you can unmute yourself. For public comment, there'll be an opportunity to do that after I review the agenda. And you can also type it into the chat. I do see some folks from our community who are not Hope Board members who have joined today. So if you have a public comment today, please go ahead and put your name in the chat, and then I'll also give an opportunity for anybody who's called in. So for today, we've got some meeting housekeeping, possible public comment. We'll do a roll call and approve your meeting minutes. And then I'm really looking forward to meeting some of your new board members and having all of you current board members introduce yourselves too. And I've got a couple question prompts to help you share about yourself. Then we will have an educational component. We've got wonderful colleagues from Lincoln County here tonight who are going to talk about their approach, the work that they're doing. So we get sort of a view of the regional approaches to homelessness. And then we'll have a community progress and update. We've got some good news coming from House Bill 5019 with funding for shelter and rehousing, and also an update about the strategic plan. Okay, just a reminder about culture and conduct. And please, if you've just joined, if you can mute yourself, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Inclusivity and kindness and curiosity and transparency and honesty and respect and with an open mind. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing so that I can see if anybody would like to do public comment. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Rebecca, is there anybody in the room?
Anybody here would like to play? No.
Okay, just confirming. Is there anybody who has called in who wants to provide a public comment? All right, hearing none, there's no public comment for today. And I'll go ahead and screen share so that we can do a little bit more business and then move on to the fun stuff. The membership update for the board, Chanel Probst had to resign because of increasing duties on campus with OSU student mental health. And Melissa Izavoran is no longer with IHNCCO. And so we have 4 new members. Bruce Butler from IHNCCO, Sarah Devine and Matt Easdale are in the room there, and Ilea Schaefer. So you have a full membership of the Hope Board. 21 board members is the limit in the bylaws, and you are there. So voting on your August minutes, I had no edits sent to me and I reviewed the minutes again. So we'll take a brief pause to ask, are there any edits to the minutes? Not hearing any, can I please have a motion to approve your August 2023 minutes?
I motion.
Who was that?
Me, the one in the blanket.
Okay, Bria, thank you. And is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Carol. We'll go ahead and take roll and please vote yay or nay on the minutes or abstain if you were not at the last meeting. Catherine. Oh, and Catherine is in the room, Sam, if you could unmute.
Approved in here.
Thank you. Carol,
Here and I approve.
thanks. Bruce, I know you are calling in for the first bit. Can you hear? And
Yes, I can hear, and I will be on camera in just a few minutes. But yes, I abstain.
thank you for being here. Alice, Alice, I know I saw you here earlier, but I can't hear you if you're trying to speak.
I can't see how to unmute.
That's okay. You are not on mute anymore, and I just saw you
Oh.
wave.
Yay.
How do you vote on the minutes?
I vote yay.
Thank you. Ricardo can't be here tonight. They are having a staff meeting on an upcoming project, and he is bummed he can't be here. So he is excused. Brian, were you able to join tonight? Okay. Cade,
Hear and approve.
thank you. Sarah, who is in the room.
Here and abstain.
Thank you. Anita,
Here and approved.
Matt, who is also in the room.
Here and abstain.
And Joel is excused tonight. They are interviewing for staff members. Aaron, who is also in the room.
And approved.
Second.
Here and I vote aye.
Okay. Ari is excused. Unless, Ari, were you able to join for this first part before back to school night?
Yes, here and approved.
Thank you. Barbara. Okay. Bria
Here and approve.
and Cindy, I forgot to put excused on here, but she has come down with something. Charles.
Here and abstain.
Peggy.
Here and abstain.
Andrea. Ilea.
I was
Here
just going to
and
say, Andrea,
abstain.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Andrea's at a conference. I know that I've communicated with her, so I'm not sure if she's running late or just out.
Okay. Thanks, Peggy. Sorry to cut you off, Ilea. I heard you and that you abstain.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. And Nancy, you're there in the room?
Here and I abstain because I was gone last meeting.
Okay. Give me just a sec. Brian is texting that he is trying to get into the meeting. Okay. Apologies for the delay. Thanks, everybody. Oh, there we go. Was that him? Oh, that's Andrea. Great. Andrea, hey, how's your audio?
Good.
Okay, great. We just took a roll call and voted on the minutes, and I know that you were there last month. How do you vote on the minutes?
I say yes or approved.
Thank you.
Yep.
Glad you could make it.
I'm at a Oregon housing conference today, so just barely made it under the wire here. Thanks.
Exciting. Well, I'm glad you're here for this part. We're going to go through and I'll just call on folks so that you don't have to keep track of who's next. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I'm sorry. If folks could please mute. Go ahead and share your name and your pronouns and the organization you're a part of or a community you're a part of. Any perspective that you bring to the Hope Board or what strength or superpower you might bring to this work. And then something personal if you'd like to share what brings you joy in your personal time. So I am going to go ahead and stop presenting. Hopefully that's okay for you all to remember if these are good prompts. And you know what, I can put these in the chat as well if that's helpful. Give me just 1 second, folks. You know what we could do is instead of going back and forth, how about we start with the folks in the room and we can just unmute you and you can share. Rebecca, would you mind starting it off and having it go around the room?
Oh, okay. It was not just for the new people. Sorry, I was trying to make sure we had everything set up here. So can you tell me what the questions are again?
Sure, I just put them in the chat. Your name, your pronouns, organization or community, perspective you bring or superpower or strength, and what brings you joy in your personal time.
Okay, I'm Rebecca Taylor. I come from Benton County Health Department in the Home Opportunity Planning Equity Program. I serve as a project manager. And I'm just going to jump ahead to what is my superpower. My superpower is being oversensitive to everything. And then also what I do in my free time, I like to squish cats.
What does that mean?
Like
It's
not with,
like you just squish them.
not with the car.
No, sorry. Okay, sorry. I just really wanted
I-
to break the ice here tonight for us. in this
I
room.
completely understand the squishing concept.
Yeah, all right. Thanks for the support, Andrea. All right, Sarah.
Yeah, we'll be next. I'm Sarah. I use she, her pronouns. I work for the Corvallis School District, supporting our students and families navigating homelessness. I feel like superpower is an oversell, but when I think about kind of the perspectives I bring to this work, not just kind of the family and youth homelessness perspective, but my background and one of my passions is working in the fields of domestic violence and sexual assault and trafficking advocacy, and thinking about the ways that those intersect with homelessness. And I feel like kind of similar things that bring me joy are my dog, who I also like to squish, but she's like 80 pounds, so it's a little harder. And I'm getting in the last like tail end of days I can be in my garden.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron. I use he, him pronouns. I am currently just a Corvallis resident, well, not just, but I was a recent graduate from the University of Oregon, and I went through the Corvallis Public School District. So I guess that's my superpower for what it's worth. And yeah, I think I bring a perspective on kind of what you were saying but for Corvallis and what it means to grow up in Corvallis and be a student in Corvallis, because that's a pretty recent experience for me given my age. And in my free time, I really like to be outside, whether that means backpacking, rock climbing, biking, and then I also really like to cook.
I'm Nancy Wise. I am a Benton County Commissioner. My perspective or strength, I am one of 3 commissioners, which sets policy direction for the county. What brings me joy and peace in my personal time is being out in the woods.
I was waiting for more.
Nope, that's it.
All right. That's it, right? My name is Catherine Bisco, she, her pronouns. The organization that I represent is not the one that I came on board with, which was really along with community services and social services and kind of that rural perspective. That's kind of how I originally got here with the origination of this H.O.P.E advisory board. The joy in personal time, I like to garden too, and it's sad that it's raining, right? But mushroom season is upon us.
Yes.
My superpower is trying to maintain and keep a community perspective in the spaces that I volunteer and work. Recognizing voices unheard and empowering others to use their gifts and supporting their communities. And that has really been how we got started in community organizing, but how we have stayed as well in my household. So my husband and I. So we are glad you're all here.
I'm Matt. I'm also a Corvallis resident. I just graduated from OSU, so it seems like we got some beef there. I just graduated with my master's in public policy. And I think my superpower is I've grown up amongst a lot of different kinds of people, so I feel like I have a good ability to just like talk and communicate with people. And also the policy degree helps, I think, too. And I also like to cook and garden, and I've got a dog I like to squish. He's got a lot of extra skin on his face, so it's nice to kind of like scrunch it all up. And I also like to fish.
And that's it for in the room. Oh, Sam, is Sam introducing herself? Please.
Oh, I am Sam Bailey. I'm an administrative specialist in the health department. I don't I guess my superpower in this context is just trying to make the technology run to the best of my ability. You're doing great. It is a challenge. And what brings me joy in my personal time is kind of everything. I'm a sort of a general enthusiast. So if there's joy to be found, I can find it. Also a superpower.
Thank you so much to everybody in the room. We'll go ahead and do Carol and then Bruce and then Alice. So Carol Butcher, and can you see the questions in the chat for some prompts?
I do see the questions. My pronouns are, well, where are we starting? My name is Carol Butcher. I'm League of Women. Oh, there's Karen Rockwell. There, I'm League of Women Voters, Housing Committee for the League, and my pronouns are she and her. I don't have any superpowers, and what brings me joy, you know, at this point in my life, being alive brings me joy. Just interacting with people and you know, having a good time. That entertains me.
Thanks, Carol.
Sure.
Bruce,
Sorry, Carol, your
welcome.
superpower is saying stuff that we're all thinking, but no one wants to say.
Yes, Carol, did you hear that? Your superpower is saying stuff we're all thinking, but nobody wants to say.
That might be a curse.
Well, thanks for being here. And Bruce, welcome back to the Hope Board. If for folks who don't know, Bruce was on the Hope Board for the first 2 years and then transitioned to Melissa Izavorin being the representative for IHN. But he was part of the original Hope recommendations formation and is now back as a board member. So Bruce, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julie. It's a real pleasure to be re-involved here. I'm really looking forward to it because I know that just a ton of great work has been going on in the time that I've been kind of away from the group. So it's really exciting to plug back in. Okay, so superpower. I don't think I have any superpowers, but I think one thing I consider myself good at is coming up with creative things to try at least when roadblocks and barriers come into place. Those things, those creative things to try aren't always practical, as others around me find out from time to time, but occasionally one works. And then personal time, like many others that have kind of spoken before me, I've always really enjoyed gardening, but in the past several years, I've been taking it to a different level of trees and chainsaws and amateur forestry activity. But it's just really an extension of my love of gardening.
That's exciting. You have the height for it. You can reach those upper limbs. Go for it, Bruce.
Yeah, that's not such a good thing sometimes.
A question for Bruce. Bruce,
Yes.
you said chainsaws are an extension of your life. That means you're like the chainsaw murderer. Is that what you're saying, Bruce? Because I'm getting out of here fast.
No, just as a tool for managing woodlots.
Okay.
An extension of my love of gardening.
Yeah, we'll keep the attendance virtual, Carol. Don't worry, you're in no danger. I'm kidding. Glad to have you back, Bruce. And Alice, Alice, you're up next. Can you see the questions in the chat for some prompts?
Yeah, I know the questions. I am Alice Carter. I am very involved with St. Olga Respite Care Association. And I have been worried because I'm 94 years old and I worried about somebody replacing me. 4 weeks ago, this young man was introduced to me and his name is Joshua. And I told him about St. Olga and he said, oh, I'd like to volunteer with that. And I said, oh, what do you do? He said, I'm an IT engineer. So I asked him to marry me, but he had a girlfriend, so that wasn't going to work. But he came and rebuilt my laptop, which was a sad thing, from the resale store at OSU, and has done wonders ever since. And he's good with people because he's been through a lot of stuff himself. And he doesn't know it, but he's my replacement. I'm not telling him yet, but anyway, he drives me everywhere. And when people ask him what he does for St. Olga, he says, I'm driving Miss Alice. So I left my superpowers on the number 2 bus, so I'm sorry about that. There you go.
Thank you, Alice. I think I might know Joshua, and that would be a wonderful replacement. What do you like to do in your personal time when you aren't saving the world?
I like to read detective stories, British, my favorite, and I'll go for the Scandinavian ones if I'm feeling strong.
They get dark. Yeah, those winters are long. Those murder mysteries are dark. Thanks, Alice. Next up, Brian, you were able to get in, weren't you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Are you at a place where you can introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Brian Cotter. I'm a lieutenant for Corvallis Fire Department. I represent the Corvallis Fire Department in the local 2240 union. My pronouns are he and him. In my free time that I do get, I'm typically teaching either for OSFM or teaching scuba diving. I don't have any superpowers. I'm just an average guy.
What is OFSM and what do you teach, Brian?
Oregon State Fire Marshal. I'm also another hat that I wear as part of the Hazmat Region 5 team. So I teach anywhere from hazmat operations, hazmat awareness, hazmat technician, and hazmat incident command.
Wow. And then scuba diving, like, do you get to do that in the Willamette River? Do you go out to the coast? Where does that happen?
I teach over, most of my classes are either done out on the coast or I go up to Washington and teach most of my classes up in Washington.
That's exciting. Thanks for sharing, Brian.
How can you do all that and not say you have a superpower?
Yeah.
I'm just an average guy, brother.
Cade and then Anita.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cade. My pronouns are they, them. I work at the Benton County Health Department. I work as a peer support specialist and lead our peer program. I also help run the Mid-Willamette Trans Support Network, which is a local nonprofit organization that supports our transgender and gender diverse community. Something I bring perspective-wise to the H.O.P.E board is lived experience in Corvallis with homelessness and housing insecurity for many years. Thankfully, it's been a while. In my free time, I also love gardening, riding my bike. And I think my superpower is just being connected with the community in a lot of different ways. So great to meet you all, new people.
Thank you, Cade. Anita.
I'm Anita Earl, she, her pronouns. I work at Samaritan. I worked for Samaritan for many, many years. And currently I'm the manager of our homeless outreach efforts and some other complex care management endeavors. I think I'm happy to tick every single box everyone mentioned for interest except the chainsaw. I'm no to the chainsaw. I do squish everything. I squish people. I think my superpower is hugging. I squish cheeks. I squish, my daughter squirms because I'm such a squisher. If I see a teenager, you will definitely be firmly held by me, which I think probably is a great superpower to have. I garden. I like all the things everyone mentioned. I love flowers and trees, and I knit, and I'm a huge BBC detective fan. Huge Masterpiece Theater girl. If there's an elderly lady out there writing a novel while she's knitting and solving crime, I know about her and I want to grow up and be her. Thanks.
Oh, Anita, you're speaking to my soul. And you do give the best hugs. Oh, that was too much. Ari, are you still here? Have you left for back to school night?
I am still here.
Great.
And my name is Ari, he, him pronouns. I live on a small farm in Philomath. Also a member of Corvallis Sister Cities Association Board. Perspective I bring is I have past lived experience with houselessness. My superpower would be, I think, organization, and a passion would be community service. I have a passion for giving back. And what brings me joy in my personal time is spending time with my family.
Thank you, Ari. And I don't think Barbara has been able to join. Barbara, speak up if you have joined.
So Julie,
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see us in the room as well. I did not, I wonder if Ari would repeat the association board that we was a member of. I missed that.
Corvallis Sister Cities Association.
Okay. Corvallis Sister Cities. Thank you.
And we have a sister city in the Ukraine, and then another one elsewhere, right? Ari, what are our sister cities again?
Yes, Ukraine and Uzgrad, Ukraine, and Gondar, Ethiopia.
Thank you. Thanks for doing that. Bria and then Charles.
Sorry, there's construction going on like right outside my window right now. So if you
We can
hear
hear
really
you
loud
just fine.
noises. My name is Bria Lewis, she, her pronouns. Let me look at the questions again because I already forgot. I am currently the Ward 2 city councilor and the liaison to the Hope Board. I was originally the co-chair, but I had to step down for that after getting elected, which was fun. I think my superpower, according to my friend, is having people like me no matter where I go. I don't know how, I don't know why, it just happens. And I had lived experience in DC with homelessness and not having the resources. And so that's why I actually decided to join the Hope Board in the first place. I was actually squishing my cat earlier when everyone was saying how much they like to squish animals. So she ran away. And what brings me joy is taking lots of naps because I am tired all of the time. That's it.
Yeah, naps are sweet. I feel that. Thanks, Bria. Charles.
My name is Charles Mon. I he, him pronouns. I am the mayor of Corvallis. Although I've actually been serving on the Hope Executive Committee long before I was mayor. My strength, I actually had this earlier, but I guess I would say my superpower is ability to facilitate a meeting with no notice. I could just jump right in and take care of things. It's a weird gift. And just I also bring a passion to this topic. I care deeply. That's why I've served so long on this board. Joy in my personal time. There's a couple things. I really enjoy the outdoors. I enjoy camping. I enjoy being on the river in my canoe or on a lake if that opportunity ever happens. It's not too often. And anything Star Wars.
And festivals around town. I always get to see what
Yep.
wonderful fun festivals around town.
Yeah, I love this community. I love being out in it.
Thanks, Charles. Peggy. Oh, and then Andrea and then Ilea, just so you're ready.
Sorry about that. Peggy McGuire, Executive Director of Community Services Consortium. I use she, her pronouns. The work of your community action agency, Community Services, is to help people exit poverty. And so that's the perspective that I bring. In that role, we work with a lot of unhoused clients and people who are precariously housed. And what brings me joy in my personal life is I put some pictures in here, all of these little people who I love to squish. And another thing for all of you mystery and detective fans out there, I'm writing a murder mystery.
Oh, yay. Oh.
Peggy, I can't wait for that. That is exciting. You know, another superpower I realized, Peggy, you have been in this work for decades in fair housing and community action, and you haven't lost your empathy and your compassion for like what's really going on with people struggling. And so many people, after that many years, are being in the like leadership position you're in. I just really appreciate that about you.
Oh, thanks, Julie. Very sweet of you.
Andrea, and then Ilea.
I'm Andrea Myrie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of Corvallis Housing First. And my joy is I'm with Nancy Woods all the way. Like being in the woods. That's why I'm here. My superpower is bringing a group of people to come to consensus, which this is a weird fact about me that I was second in my state speech competition for discussion, where the point of the category was to bring a group of people to consensus. So I often use my skills that I learned in high school speech. So that's what I got.
Thanks, Andrea. Ilea.
I'm Ilea Schaefer, she, her pronouns. I'm the operations coordinator for Unity Shelter. The perspective I think I bring to the board is the emergency shelter side, but also I come from public health and years in nonprofit work. So something that brings me joy is also squishing all the animals, but I also just added chickens to the menagerie. So that's fun.
Chickens aren't as squishy though, right?
Mine's pretty cuddly, so I lucked out.
My name's Julie Arena. I use she, her pronouns, and I help coordinate and support this wonderful board of folks. And one of my strengths, similar to Andrea, I really love talking with people and understanding where there's consensus, where we can align, where we can connect, how we can move forward with a sense of unity and buy-in, even if we disagree about some things. I like doing that. And in my free time, I like being with my kids and I like not being with my kids. Those are my favorite things in my free time, spending time with them and then not spending time with them. Well, thank you, Hope board members. I'm glad you got to know each other a little bit better. Bruce.
Yes, thank you to, I think it was Samantha who bumped the questions up in the chat. It made me realize I forgot a couple of things. He, him pronouns, and I'm the CEO of Intercommunity Health Network, CCO, which is in turn part of Samaritan Health Services.
Thank you for following up with that, Bruce. Did anybody else forget anything they wanted to add? And you're getting props from our behavioral health director, Damien, in the chat saying, what an amazing group. An amazing group it is. I'll go ahead and move on to respect our guest time tonight. Let me go ahead and screen share. We have a couple of updates. The second co-chair position is open and Sarah Devine is interested in that role. So there will be a co-chair election at your October meeting. Again, the co-chair, there are two of them from the general board membership. Catherine Biscoe is one of your co-chairs and there is still a second opening. And that co-chair would attend and join the Hope Executive Committee meetings who they set the agendas and discuss our educational components and upcoming community updates. So be on the lookout for that next month. Thank you, Sarah, for your interest. An update about scheduling. In November, there is a federal holiday the fourth week of November. And so all of your November meetings are going to be adjusted 1 week earlier. So the Hope Executive Committee meeting will be November 1st instead of the usual second Wednesday. And the Hope Board meeting will be November 15th instead of the usual November 22nd. I know there's a couple things that land on November 15th, like the Willamette Criminal Justice Council. But that's the best date that we could pick to not interfere with that holiday week. So I'll be updating the meeting notice tomorrow so that you guys all have the right one on your calendars. Another update, I am going to be on a 2-month leave for October and November. I'm going to be taking care of myself and my family. So this is my last week for a couple of months. So follow up with me in December if you want to talk to me about something. Or if you have something you need to talk about in October and November, Rebecca Taylor, who's there in the room, our project manager, is going to help support some of the Hope Board duties. Libby Lowski Winter is our grant writer and researcher, and she's going to help facilitate some meetings. April Holland is our behavioral health department, our health department director. She's going to fill in with other duties. And Kaylee Olson is our communications coordinator, and she'll continue with the communications support. Any questions about any of that? Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Karen, I see you're here. I'm just going to give you the briefest introduction because I know you have some slides. But many of you know Karen Rockwell. She is now the director of the Housing Authority out in Lincoln County. But she previously worked for Habitat for Humanity right here locally and has lots of relationships with folks on the call today. So I'll stop talking and hand the reins over to you, Karen.
Excellent. And I actually didn't, Peggy, I don't know if you still have the slides or handy or not, but I'm less of a PowerPoint person and more of a talky person, as most people know. Good evening, Karen Rockwell.
Hey, Karen, I was going to say I do, and I can try to share them. I got to tell you, this is not my strong suit either, but I will
Peggy, I
give it
can
a.
also share them if that would be helpful to you too. But
That
if you
would
want
be
to take,
We
fabulous.
love that, Julie. Thank you.
give me a
Yeah.
second. You go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Karen Rockwell. I'm the executive director of the Housing Authority of Lincoln County. I'm also the administrator of the HB 4123 Lincoln County Homeless Advisory Board, and then also a member of the Governor's Housing Production Advisory Task Force. So I was going to say my superpower strength is saying yes, but my Achilles heel is not saying no. So they kind of go hand in hand. Very excited to be talking to you tonight. There's a lot happening in Lincoln County, and as we know, Lincoln County is very connected to everything that's happening in our Tri-County region in Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln. Peggy is going to join me in this conversation because the two of us are stronger than the one of us, and and she's been doing a ton of work traveling up and down the coast to make some things happen in our area, and it's very exciting. So one of the first things I think we wanted to talk to you about today is what we've been doing with the Lincoln County Housing Advisory Board and how we've been standing up the work of the HB 4123 pilot. Julie, I think I forgot how much time I have, so I want to be conscientious of that.
You are fine. You could talk for about 15, 20 minutes and still have another 15 for questions. We have flexible time in tonight's meeting. So guide me to where you would like me to be in your
you can stay, move up there. I like that better. This slide is my favorite slide. So we have in this group been working with all of the municipalities from the very beginning. They signed an intergovernmental agreement and have been meeting monthly as a full group, and then again in work sessions. They kind of divided into separate groups and have been nailing out different research activities that are in conjunction with a strategic planning consultant. One of the things that's really impressed me, though, is that in this conversation, it's really about how do we have that cooperative and collaborative effort in our response to the homelessness, but at the municipality level. So I think it was a little bit strange at first because I'm always coming in from the viewpoint of the service provider, but this was really directed at how can the municipalities support what's happening in that nonprofit area to streamline things. So what is it? Is it policy change? Is it unrestricted grant funding? Is it helping build capacity? You know, what are the barriers in creating a coordinated response? So the process is, I'm sure you're all familiar with, you know, sometimes the the planning, it feels like it takes forever. And for us, we're at the end of our planning stage. So we've gone through several months of research and public outreach and lived experience panels, service provider panels, and we are finally at the stage of setting and finalizing our strategic goals. And what we found is really exciting, that it's not necessarily the act of planning that's bringing us together, but it's the act of intentionally setting aside conversation on this topic that is really bringing us together. And as the work groups continue, or as the meetings continue each month, the municipalities have really, the mayors and city administrators have been very present at the table. So we've had, we've got, I'm thinking 8 or 9, Peggy, I'm making that up, is that the City of Siletz, the Confederated Tribes Community Services Consortium, Yachats, Depot Bay, Newport, Lincoln City, 7, and then the Housing Authority. So it's been very exciting. Our conversations continue to be more robust. And we started recently to really dig into, okay, what are our next steps? Excitingly, they're kind of forming organically, even though, you know, after 8 months of planning, you can't really say it's organic, but I'm going to say magically after 8 months of planning. And we're realizing some of our major barriers are things that are popping up in these other conversations. And HB 5019 funding, for example, our strategic planning was at the right space for us to put together a really robust community plan to enter into our 5019 funding, but do it under the auspices of our HB 4123 group. And there we're now branching out to service providers and formalizing a relationship that will help us with stronger data entry. And that then is very exciting to us, but it leads to the, oh, hey, what's happening in January? Our point in time count, which our point in time count was horrible. It was just horrible. 2 consecutive years in a row. Really, for all intents and purposes, our point in time count says there's no homelessness on the coast, which, you know, I can tell you where I live, I know there's at least 50 people living in camps very near me. And so it was very frustrating to have that be a focus of attention, that we are being judged or evaluated or funded based on our inability as a community to have the capacity to even do the point in time count. And in our world of equity and diversity and inclusion, to penalize counties who don't have the capacity to do an appropriate count seemed super not conforming to any logic model that I had in my brain. So going through the 5019 funding and having the back and forth of it, you know, oh, you're going to get this, now you're not going to get this, now you're going to get this, and now it's going to be evaluated this way, and oh, guess what, you're still going to be the 3rd lowest funded county in the rural continuum of care. That then brought us to another conversation, which was, I don't really like our rural continuum of care, and how can we change this dynamic? And that's where we move to the conversation that Peggy's been having with all of us to create a tri-county continuum. We were in a place, because of our HB 4123, to have everybody at the table at the right time to say, oh my gosh, this is a no-brainer to us. And I think that the time is really good for us to have these deep, wonderful conversations. I'm gonna pause. Yeah.
You have a slide on data. Would you like me to bring that up to
I love
round out?
data, and then
Okay.
I'm going to pull Peggy in because Peggy talks data in her presentation that she's been doing throughout our county, and Peggy, you get to say things too.
Well, and that's only fair. You were doing such a fabulous job that I didn't feel the need to get involved. But the interesting thing is with this particular, well, sorry, let me step back. So since I put this slideshow together and just ran it past Karen and said, what do you think? And she's like, oh, okay, that's good. It seems only fair that I should have to talk. So some of this I lifted from the consultant, Morant McLeod. They've got credit down here on the bottom underneath the bottom line by the numbers and their little logo. And they use some really interesting methodology to come up with the numbers of the people that they believe are truly homeless in Lincoln County. And honestly, I think that this is a very good process that we could utilize across each of our counties. And I felt like their numbers were very accurate because as we begin to have these conversations in each of our counties and really dive deeper into all the different sources, and I pointed them initially, by the way, Carol, to the League of Women Voters report and said, here was a great report that the League of Women Voters did where they looked at all of the places where people said, and this is how we counted the people who were unhoused, and this is the number we got to. And so I just really feel like what I'm hearing across every single county is that there's somewhere between around 1,500 to 2,000 people who are unhoused. And that makes sense to me because what we advocates know about the point in time count is that it is probably only 25 to 30% of the HUD definition of the unhoused population, which is basically people who are living outdoors or in places not meant for human habitation. And if you combine that with the school district counts where they actually count people who are doubled up, and then there's a factor for the people that we don't know about, I'm sure that that is a much more accurate number for every county, that kind of 2,000 people range. And so anyway, I just thought that this data was interesting and I felt that it was important for us to look at some of how they put these things together. I also really liked, the Morant McLeod group did a super important slide that I think we should use that strategy as we move forward in each county. And what they did was they mapped everybody in some level of social services. So whether it was a nonprofit, a faith-based organization, whether it was the police department, the fire department, code enforcement, parks and rec, the libraries, and they found everybody who said, yeah, we're touching the lives of people who are unhoused and offering resources. And they mapped that and they mapped the ways that they were interacting with one another. And so what you began to see, and I don't know if heat map is the appropriate term, some of you map wonks out there probably have a better grasp on the different types of maps. But what you saw was a group, many circles across the county. And so it showed where these different entities were. Some were just like little pin, thank you very much. Some were pinpricks, some were these larger circles. And I know that you can't see a lot of the information in the map, but the detail is not what you need to see. What you need to see is the concept. So the very large green dots were the organizations that were really doing a lot of activities, and those tended to be the more grant and contract funded entities like CSC, like Samaritan House, like Housing Authority of Lincoln County. And then the smaller organizations were the entities that were touching a smaller group of people because their real mission was not to serve the homeless or the unhoused. It was really to do other things, but they were doing that as a tangential connection to their organization or because they had a level of compassion or passion for serving those folks. And what this told me was that so in the concept of the SIM, which I think we've talked about here, the systems intercept model, it really gives us an opportunity to find people who are unhoused where they are receiving some level of service and find out who they are and what their needs are. And when we begin to do that, then we can have a much more robust coordinated entry tracking process and figure out the who of who is homeless, and then really begin to look at the data of why they're homeless, what their needs are, and begin to do some of the work that we've sequential intercept mapping. Thank you, Julie. And we can really begin to understand then where the gaps in services are, where the needs are, what type of housing we need, and then begin to have some really concrete plans on figuring out how to fund development of that housing, how many units we need, what sizes of units, what supportive services need to go with those units, and begin to really understand how we can truly move people out of homelessness. So
Peggy,
I
you
just,
do have a slide here about housing information and understanding the housing supply. Do you want me to pull those
thanks.
up?
Yes, I forgot all about that. Thank you. It's been so long since I've seen this. So the other thing that Morant McLeod did is they looked at every housing unit in Lincoln County. And they figured out like what the single family units were, what the commercially owned apartments were, what was multifamily residential. And then they began to talk about the issue of the single family residences that were people's second homes. So they were not on the market. They were not available to be occupied by people who were unhoused because families use those homes in different ways. And on top of that, we know that in the destination resort communities, that vacation rentals eat up a huge volume of the existing housing. And so that's what many of the advocates had been saying for quite some time, that we can't find places to get folks housed. So if they come to the top of the housing authority list, they get a voucher, they're looking for housing, we may not be able to place them in housing because even though there are vacant units, those units are truly set aside out of the housing stock for vacation rentals or for somebody's second home. And this has a huge impact on the community. And we see that across Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties, more so in Benton and Lincoln than we do in Lynn, but still it's there. So then when we talk about the per capita income in the housing information, we were able to look at that by the work that Morant McLeod had done, and like what the cost, what people would have to make in order to be able to afford housing. And then what they really did is they looked at what was happening globally in the community, and they really did a huge amount of listening and community engagement. And I just want to give Karen so much credit for all of this because she has guided this work and really convened this, taken this taken the reins of this work and really driven this process. And with this, we were able to look deeply at everything. And so they looked at the entire system in Lincoln County of how people become homeless, what happens to them when they become homeless, why aren't we able to get ourselves out of this situation? And they looked at transportation issues, they looked at economic development issues, affordable housing development, what the census of what housing was available in the community, the people that were there, and they've just been really drilling down on all of this information. And and trying to figure out like how do we fix it in the immediate moment, and then really what is the long-term work to create a healthy system that enables us to serve people that are unhoused, so that the only people that are unhoused are people who have had a recent emergency and fallen into homelessness, or people who claim to want to be unhoused, which that is a very controversial topic, and I have a lot of energy around that. But there is some discussion that is out in the community that people feel has validity about people who choose to remain homeless. And I'll give you an example of one of the things that came up is there's an entire population of young surfers
I
who
was just
kind
gonna
of go,
say surfers.
yeah, who go up and down the coast and follow the weather and follow the tides and do surfing and live in the campgrounds. And so while those people are technically homeless, they are not seeking housing in the community and they do not want long-term housing in the community. And then you have a population of people that Karen and I have to keep dealing with that are folks who are unable to support themselves, but they're living in RVs or campers, and they are seeking some kind of support to maintain that lifestyle, but they don't fit the funding categories that make them eligible for any kind of supports that would pay for their, for example, their housing costs in that RV. So I'm not sure, Karen, what else would you like to talk about or like me to talk about?
That was really good. I'm glad you brought in the data because I always, I think it's really important to show that the decisions we're making are based on data. I find that to be an essential component when we're dealing with very emotional conversations. I learned that from Donna Holt. We stay with the facts. I think one of the interesting things in another conversation with data is we really are looking at the gaps. And I think in our whole Tri-County region, we have a lot of service providers. This is not a community of people who don't care about people. We've got nonprofits, we've got public entities, we have for-profit corporations. A lot of people care, and there is the assumption that we're all dog eat dog about funding, but really there's a lot of different layers and different avenues with funding. Part of our problem is lining up our strategies so that we're collaborative with our efforts. And in our group, when we mapped out where we were in the shelter to housing continuum, we could really clearly identify where those gaps were really held. So that way we could focus some concentrated energy on capacity building in those areas. And that's where the HB 5019 funding really was targeted. We did our community plan really thinking, okay, this is going to be, and I put this in, I'm happy to share our community plan with anybody, but we really focused it on the first 6 months of when we get this funding, this is going to 6 months build capacity in these 11 different organizations. And then from there, we anticipate and are hoping that our HB 4123 remaining funding could come in and then support the next steps of that capacity growth. We also have had some activities happen at the same time, parallel to the pass of this activity, that were oddly not entwined or braided in. And some of you know that we're standing up a new emergency shelter in Newport and in Lincoln City. The health department is taking the lead on this. And thank you, IHNCCO Bruce, for supporting this effort. It was very, very timely because it was I was looking at my text to see, like, how did Jane and I get wrapped up in this emergency shelter conversation, and why wasn't it through, LCHAB? It was at the very end of July that Jane and I said, hey, let's do this. And that does not give anybody enough time to open a shelter in October. But she said yes too. So we're going to do it. We're opening the temporary shelter on Tuesday next week, and we're closing on our building on October 31st. And then we're also hoping to open the Lincoln County shelter November 1st. This oddly wasn't done inside of the LCHAB, and it was an independent fundraising effort, kind of simultaneous with all the work that we've been doing. So it was a good example of why, why were we in a sense not totally with each other, walking in step as this group and doing things independently. And obviously, you know, a lot of that onus falls on me because I'm sitting in the middle of both of those spaces, and hadn't connected the dots. But sometimes things do move quickly. And because these are activities that take intention, sometimes it's harder to bring things together than it is to just run after them. Oh, good. Thank you. Bless you.
It's been slow.
Everything in our world seems to happen at either super fast or super slow. I think the other thing that's really important for us to know as a community is a lot of what we do at the local level is impacted and or controlled at the state or federal levels. And so while we might have some really good intention locally, what we want to would do, for example, with our policy changes or something, unless we have increased support from federal or from state, or if we don't have systematic changes, I really feel like we get handcuffed at the local level. Peggy said something I need to make sure Carol knows. I also shared the League of Women Voters report with our strategic consultant, Carol. Not just Peggy, me too. Me too.
Well, but you helped write the report. So that's a little different.
I shared both of them with them. My work with the Housing Production Advisory Council at the state level has been really eye-opening. One, in the sense of when the governor invites you to do something, don't assume that the time commitment she tells you is going to be the time commitment you actually put into it. I thought I was going to be doing one Friday a month, and instead you're actually putting in about 5 hours a week on work for this group, and it goes through December. With that being said, it's been extremely valuable to see where at the state level things really can get blocked up. I'm on both the finance work group and the land availability work group. And so I've been able to bring the rural coastal experience, as well as just the rural valley experience from my time being a single family home builder in the valley, as to where we're having issues in rural areas with our infrastructure. And I think we all really understand we're strapped for funding at the local municipality level. We can barely fund our police and our fire departments, and now we're asking for SDC waivers. You know, it just doesn't make sense. And because we have handcuffed ourselves with our Measure 5 and our Measure 50 property taxes, everything else we do is a Band-Aid fix. You know, we're looking for ways to kind of plug holes in the wall, but another hole is going to open if you don't just crack it all open and say this is a problem. So we have some really exciting recommendations that are going forward to the governor, some in the short session and some at the end of it, but they'll include insurance, risk pools for affordable housing. It'll include things like having Oregon Housing and Community Services have a standalone finance department. So you're not waiting 18 months to get funding for the award that you were expecting. We are standing forward a Measure 50 property tax reform or a mortgage interest deduction reform on second homes. So there's some really meaty stuff in there that will have direct ties, hopefully, to local infrastructure financing, which will allow more housing stock to go into effect. This, I think, is just very important to watch as those items come forward. And it is pretty amazing work, but it will only be amazing if we're growing off of work that's been done in other committees. You know, I think all of us now have so much awareness about the housing issues that we can all speak very intelligently on them. So we're lifting up these ideas that have been generated in past committee work, and kind of doing the torch run for the next, like, we can do it. Everybody show up and vote for this one. But I do think the other thing that I'm finding, again, with the housing production task force is it is being done with a lens of equity and diversity and inclusion. And that's a hard ask, to be intentionally anti-racist, and to call into question things that have been held up as the ideal in our state for decades. But I also look and say, you know, if a lot of these things that are restricting our growth right now were developed within our lifetime, we also have the ability to impact those as we move forward for the betterment of the entire community and not just in a protectionist avenue for those who have already gained access to housing or access to wealth or access to education.
So are you talking about development policies?
I'm talking about kind of just relooking at all policies, you know, what they all are. And I'm not saying which ones, I'm saying let's just have an open eye with everything as we move forward into that context. I know I have bias, and I've had a lot of bias in the conversations that I've had to relook at myself to say, why am I feeling this way? Why do I trigger into a no statement here instead of understanding the full scope of the picture?
Karen, can I ask a
digressed.
question? Can I ask you a question about this state work? Because it's really important and impactful. You said you're working on this task force through December. What's sort of the timeline for the governor to look at those policy recommendations and do something with them?
She's already started looking at them, and she lined up a whole bunch of them to bring into the short session. And I just got to see that list a couple weeks ago. One thing that struck me when I was looking at her short session policy work that she's going to be bringing forward, it really is that even though we're putting in a lot of time in these work sessions, it's not new stuff. Like if you go back to the last legislative session and start pulling up some of the housing bills, you'll see those resurface again. But it's also the same conversations in the some of the recommendations that are coming forward in the work groups. The others you won't see until the following session, although a lot of them are also State Department focused. They don't need legislative action. Some things just don't need that action. And this process has been really cool because we are at the table with all of the state department heads. Dr. Brenda Bateman with Land and Conservation is on one of my work groups. Andrea Bell is in one of my work groups. So they're at the table in the conversations, and they know and have heard the perspectives of everybody else in the room. And we're coming together to say, okay, I love all your staff, and I hate that it takes so long to process a lift application, or I hate that I have to give you two pro formas for two different funding streams, you know, when it's the same project. So they're hearing it and then digesting and coming up with workable solutions for positive change. So some things you're going to see already. Some things departments are already incorporating in. For example, the ONA passed, and now we're helping to process how we do the Oregon Housing Needs Assessment and how that's going to impact our areas. And it's going to be a huge, that's one of the greatest things that's going to happen to the rural areas, because they don't have to staff a housing needs analysis anymore. It's going to come from the state, and they're going to be told, here's your housing needs analysis based on our economic data, instead of them having to staff up, spend that money, pay consultants. That'll be a time and cost savings.
That's great news. Karen, you have one more slide about where we are now. I think it's with the House Bill 5019 funding. Do you want me to share that? And then I'd love to open it up for questions and discussion.
Sure.
And before we open it up to questions, can I also jump in with something about the continuum of care process?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
let me
really important.
Share this last one of how it's going with your funding, and then COC stuff. Go ahead, Karen.
So this is since we did this slide, we did get our final revised budget and submitted the revised budget. I did on Monday. Becca did on Friday, the day it was due. But we did have we did have one of our projects. We had 5 shelter applications that we submitted. I really wanted the state to see the full need of both our rapid rehousing and our shelters. So we had 11 organizations and 5 applications for shelter. The it's mixed, but I'm gonna bitch just for a second. Like I said earlier, we were the 3rd lowest funded county. We had identified what I thought was a realistic need, and it was probably about 1.7 million, and that included some that didn't include all the shelter asks because they were variable. But the rapid rehousing, we really received 650,000 in the rapid rehousing, and that just it was very difficult to do such a cut for everybody, knowing that you're not going to get the impact that you want to have or the capacity building that you want to have if you really have to dilute the funding that much. And our shelter application went to Helping Hands in Lincoln City, which is it'll be a transitional shelter primarily. They do have a low barrier shelter, but it's not an emergency shelter. You can't walk up to it. So, and they were scheduled to open in November anyway. So I kind of like the governor looked at what was the least amount of money she could put in for the biggest bang, and she's taken credit for all 70 of their beds, even though 50 of them are transitional. And like it's kind of a little bit of politics here. And I think that had she really wanted to make a real impact, she could have helped fund the emergency shelter going to those people who have the potential to die if they're left out in the rain. So a little bit of politicking there. Thanks to Peggy, we did have an interview with the Portland KATU station that also got picked up in Austin, Texas. It's nice to have the national news, and I don't think Austin, Texas cares. But yeah, I digress again. Peggy, I really do think Peggy, talking about that rural continuum of care in our Tri-County effort, that impacts all of us in a really good way. Peggy, come back.
Okay, so thank you. And yeah, I was glad to not be the only one saying nasty things about the governor's allocations, and welcomed Karen to say, hey, here's the real problem. It's interesting, the reporter texted me afterwards and she said that when she left the shelter that has closed because they no longer have funding, that a gentleman, a 77-year-old gentleman, came up and he was plugging in his rechargeable oxygen tank. And he said, I'm homeless and I don't know what's going to happen when I can't plug in here at this building anymore. And she said, wow, would you let me interview you? And he did not want to be on camera. But those are the kind of stories that so many of us hear every single day over and over and over that people just don't hear and understand. They see a bunch of, fentanyl distribution things on the city streets in Portland, and they don't look beyond that. Anyway, so that's another editorial comment. So I have been to, I want to say 9, it feels like 109 city council meetings over the last month. And I have scheduled, and Emily is scheduling Benton and Lynn counties for me in the upcoming month. So I'll be on the road and doing those. And I've been doing a presentation that talks about what is a continuum of care, what's the situation now. And then I wanted to share this slide that if you have an interest, you can take a look at it. This one in particular is about Benton County, but I have tailored them to each of the counties that I'm presenting in. And I have a slide in each one. I have a slide about how does this all work together, what's already happening in our county, and then how does this work together with what is happening on a regional basis already in our 3 counties. And what this does is it helps people get a visual of understanding the local planning groups, understanding the House Bill 4123 groups, and then understanding how that connects with the continuum of care. And what I keep explaining to people is that my absolute most heartfelt desire is that these local planning groups that we have established and are operating, such as the Lincoln County Homeless Advisory Board, such as the Coordinated Office for Benton County and City of Corvallis and all of their intergovernmental council, such as the Lynn County MAC group, that I am hoping that those groups will continue on in perpetuity as the local groups that are part of the Tri-County Continuum of Care, because I believe that we have absolutely all of the right people at the table. And as Karen talked about earlier, having those really deep, meaty, robust, intentional conversations about this topic, and having that across so many different disciplines. We've got the mental health folks at the table. We've got the physical health folks, and we've got the behavioral health folks at the table. We have the housing developers, the housing providers. We have members of the concerned members of the community. We have faith-based folks. We have all of the social services providers. We've got the police department. We've got the fire department. You name it, the elected officials. And so those are the people that we need to keep having these conversations and to really dial into these discussions and these plans as we move forward. So I'm feeling pretty good so far everywhere I've been. Everybody is very supportive of moving to a tri-county continuum. I haven't had any resistance whatsoever. One of the city councils talked about when they do their resolution, because I'll have to go back and get a resolution from each city council, they would like to change some of the verbiage that encourages the continuum and HUD to reconsider their definition of homelessness. Now, there is some conversation that continuums of care can have a different definition of homelessness, but what that doesn't impact is it doesn't impact the HUD funding and how that funding eligibility is able to be used. And so that is a little bit of a clash of concepts right there. But I just feel like we need to keep having that conversation about the culturally specific communities that intrinsically just don't have a belief system that allows people to live outdoors. And they will bring folks into their home and share housing with people who are, in many cases, can be relative strangers, and say, we're going to keep you here because you're one of us, and we're not going to let you be living outdoors. And we have to figure out a way to keep serving those communities in order to ensure that we've got equity in this work. So I'm not sure if you have any questions about what's happening with the continuum of care conversations. Happy to answer those if you have any.
Thank you, Peggy. I'd love to give an opportunity to folks who are there in person who have questions for Karen or Peggy about all that was just shared. It was a lot. Thanks to you both.
It was a lot. Thank you. Thank you for letting us be a lot.
Again, I don't know if you could see my hand. So this is Catherine.
Hi, Catherine. I saw you come in the room. I'm happy to see you.
Right. You too. I am curious. So first, thank you for so much work that gets us to this space and point in time, because it is not without tremendous significance to how we move forward and all of the service that you have done, you know, in your roles, but also in your advocacy positions. It's essential to making this happen. My question more specifically is to Karen on the OHNA, so the Oregon Housing Needs Assessment, and how do we know where that's going to land for certain, as in, you know, hearing that the state's going to take that burden off of our local governments as to the cost of doing those housing needs analyses, which are required. they're going to take that off, but is that still planned to run through the counties as to who will decide what gets built? And that was some of the first narratives. I haven't followed it closely enough to know if it's going to go directly to the city of such and such, will build such and such based on this, or we are looking to support you in building such and such. Let me rephrase that. Or is that still planning to lean on the counties to kind of figure out how to navigate that housing, which of course would change how we do development through our planning departments?
I think some of the details are still being worked out there. And it is, if you have not read the OHN legislative report, it's a really good document, and I'll get that to Julie so she can share out the link with you. What I know, I think the cities, it's not meant to take local planning department authority away. It is meant to allow for a more uniform, consistent way to measure the entire state's housing needs, and to do it with the equity lens. So I think what I was most impressed about it is going to set up for a local municipality, whether it's the city or the county. I think it's for the whole region. It will identify, you need X number of affordable housing units for this demographic, this under median income, for example. Not just a blanket, you need it for your entire population. It will actually target out for you. You need it for this population, you need it for this population, you need it for this population. And here's our recommendation to increase your housing capacity. It is supposed to also then come with technical assistance from the state. So that way, those communities that are under-resourced in their planning departments, those, like Philomath, like Monroe, like Junction City, like Yachats or Depot Bay, they still will have the ability to have a needs assessment done, but then also have some capacity technical assistance tied to it to help them get some of their goals accomplished. I think a lot of the logistics of it are still being worked out, in some of the recommendations that are coming forward will impact some of the smaller communities, because I know personally I have a recommendation that we don't allow. I didn't like the H.O.P.E 2001 and 2003, that it was restricted to only certain populations. They didn't, for example, bring Philomath into that. And I think that everybody should be accountable for doing things to enhance affordability and attainability of housing. But I also understand that if it doesn't come with financial support or technical support for those smaller communities, then you can't do it anyway. So some of those details are getting hammered out in this moment with these recommendations.
Karen, can I ask, maybe in the first half of 2024, after things have been finalized and we kind of know what's been adopted, what's in the pipeline, that we invite you or somebody else from that task force to come back and say, here were our recommendations, here's what got adopted. I think we'd really be interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the meantime, too, I can also share out some of the items that are coming up in the short session that we might want to just have our eye on as
really
interested
helpful.
community members. Yep.
That'd be really helpful. Thank you for that. Other questions in the room?
Well, this is Nancy Wise. I feel inclined to just comment as, the commission that's liaison to the city of Monroe, Philomath, the Dare Village. And with one of my other hats on, the chair of the Local Officials Advisory Committee. Technical assistance is great. Equity lenses are great. And I appreciate this work, and I know it's necessary, but I also need to be cautious when we talk about uniform and one size fits all for small communities, because if you've seen one community in Oregon, you've seen one community in Oregon. And, our land use really is a reflection of our values. So just the way we talk about it, we need to be careful, I think, and we need to think about the political ramifications of how the rural small cities feel, if that makes sense. So just put that out
I
there.
think your perspective is, I think your perspective is spot on. And it is a balance. And I also agree that you can't completely remove local decision making from land use policy. You can't. But at the same time, I also know, having been in several situations in my life, not just in Oregon, where those are also used as the biggest NIMBY moments ever. So I think your challenge as an elected representative is not potentially to challenge the status quo in public, but to challenge your own bias in that moment and say, sometimes going up against political will is the right thing to do if you want to be in the moment of advancing equity. It's a conversation you internalize. I don't think it will change unless we all look inside ourselves. I'm not here to change you. I'm here to change me and my bias, but also to say this is the moment. This is the moment in especially in land use conversations. And I had to sit through some public testimony on one of the H.O.P.E meetings not too long ago. And what I was hearing was so disturbing to me, because we had public comment where people said they shouldn't be living in Portland. They should be living in Coos Bay. They will be happier there. And in diversity, equity, and inclusion, I choose the trees. And this is the moment where I say, now let's pause and let's say, what are you protecting in this moment? And why are you using those words to do it? I agree. We don't want to open our urban growth boundaries up for, just for willy-nilly. We don't want to destroy our wetlands, but I think we can take a look at how things are currently being done and just ask the question, did we really make this policy restrictive in the beginning for the right reasons?
Thanks, Karen, and thanks for the perspective, Nancy. Are there other questions in the room?
Karen, I was just going to say, I just had a conversation with a woman here at the conference who's, I can't remember what organization she was with, but she's working on land use and advocacy. And she said those exact same things, like that some of our land use policy is really about continuing to redline and to marginalize populations of people who need housing. And so that's something I never thought about until she said that today.
Yeah. It is an unfortunate reality that we've seen some literature, some really popular, color of law literature, Matthew Desmond's book. We've seen some of the things come out, but we're seeing more and more evidence that some of what we've done specifically in the state of Oregon and continue to hold forward is literally to hold the status quo for wealthy white who have already accumulated their wealth early on and do not want others to have access to it. That's something that we're seeing. It's not everywhere, and it's not necessarily in all code either. I think the environmental conversation is really a real one. We're going through climate change. We're going through a lot of different things where we have to make sure we're not creating one law at the expense of something else, but it's conversations we have to have.
Aaron, I'm going to interject. There was another question in the room, and then we'll get to you, Carol. Aaron, I think you wanted to ask something.
Yeah, I just had a question either for Karen or for Peggy. Going back to the point in time count in Lincoln County, I'm just curious if when you've been talking with other counties or engaging with other partners, kind of what the conversation has been. I'm not exactly sure where other counties in Oregon or the state is as a whole on moving away from the point in time count, or at least considering other methodologies for tracking, the numbers of people that we need to be tracking. So I'm just curious what those conversations have looked like when you're sharing information with other partners or with other counties.
Let me jump in on the point in time count conversation. So great question. And, we had this little thing called COVID, and part of the problem with the point in time count is it's highly dependent upon volunteer participation. And so, because so few people were willing or able to get out and meet one-on-one with people who were unhoused and count them and get the data that's required for to be input into the counting system, everybody's counts were substantially lower than they should have been to reflect an accurate picture. I mean, they're always difficult anyway because people have to you have to have enough volunteers, find the people who are unhoused, and they have to be willing to participate. So a lot of different things. There has been some discussion that is being led by Mark Edwards, who's an OSU professor, and some folks from my team and some folks who I hope will continue to be involved in our Tri-County Continuum about creating a statistically significant sampling methodology with the help of OSU that we can use going forward. And that will improve our ability to get some better counts and some better numbers. It's a process that HUD allows, but your entire continuum has to agree to it. And we have not had buy-in from the balance of state continuum in the past. So we're hoping to see that piece change in the future.
Peggy, Barbara is here today, and Barbara, I know you were involved a lot on talks about this statistical sampling model and talking with Dr. Edwards. Is there any update about that from your perspective?
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, one of the stumbling blocks that we incurred was the different IRBs.
Please state all of your acronyms, Barbara.
Oh, sorry. The Institutional Review Board for Samaritan Health as well as OSU. There was a lot of obstacles to overcome, but it appears that we may have overcome those. We did get data from the Community Services Consortium. And then we also got data from Samaritan Health, and that went to OSU as our honest third party, which is the way this project is set up. When they first tried to see if they could merge the hashed data that has the people's names hashed out, but then has like their birth date and some other characteristics to help us actually identify people. It did not work, but we were able, or I shouldn't say we, the two folks at OSU and then also on Polina Kaiser's group at Samaritan Health, were able to finally get the data to merge, and there were 333 unique individuals. So the next step is just going through and making sure that there were no errors. And that's about all I have. Everything's kind of in a as we're dealing with these fairly large data sets, it just takes a while to make sure that what we have is accurate. And then what we can do then is start looking, I think, if I remember correctly, Paulina said one of the other issues was some of the IHN data with regards to cost coding. And so that is also a very important piece that we need, because that's really the whole basis of this project, is to understand the utilization for not only with the service providers, but also at Samaritan Health.
And I apologize. What Barbara's talking about is an analysis of data that we have. And Aaron, that is really different than the PIT count, which is what your question was about. But Barbara's been involved in a lot of these data talks separate from the PIT count. CSC, where Peggy works, and IHN, where Bruce works, and Samaritan. worked with OSU to take a batch of data from the hospital system and from our homelessness data system to do a crosswalk. And that's what Barbara is talking about, to really understand how many folks who are experiencing homelessness are utilizing our ERs and health system. What is it costing that system? And because, those data systems don't really talk. So this is the first time we've had an in-depth analysis that's going to yield really rich data about what is the cost of not housing people when it comes to healthcare. And I know that sounds like a really analytical, businessy way to say it, but making the cost argument helps move us forward in lots of other ways. So thanks, Barbara. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. And I just wanted to add a corollary to that. So knowing what the true cost is, or at least the best cost estimate that we can get, does give us the evidence basis to then go to the commission and other policymakers and say, it might be cheaper to, like the point that Andrea made in a few meetings back, is for the 20 to 40 people in the county that need constant care. What if we just created like an assisted living facility for them? Would that actually be cheaper than the system that we have now? So,
and this is the kind of data that we need to have actual numbers instead of just saying $1 million Murrays without an actual tangible. Here's how much it's costing. Yeah. Carol, thank you for being patient. I know you've had a question for a while. Do you remember it?
I do remember my question, and it's actually it's a question based on ignorance. And well, first, thanks to Karen and Peggy for the presentation. But I was struck with the collaborative effort that Karen has going over at the coast. And again, this is the ignorant part of me speaking, but I don't have a sense that same multi-city collaboration is happening in Benton County with that buy-in from the governmental people. And I don't know if Peggy or Karen has it. Probably Peggy, I guess, would have a better sense, or anybody is are we working, is any of that happening here?
So the short answer, Carol, is yes. In both Benton and Lynn counties, it is happening. I have to be quite frank with you. I feel like the enthusiasm for the participation is much higher in Lincoln County, where you routinely have mayors from every single one of those cities and multiple city council people participating in all of the different committees of the group and in the main meeting. And all Karen has to do is put out a message and say, hey, we need to have a talk about this. And all of those folks show up at a meeting. They knock themselves out to do it.
Yeah, and that's what I don't see happening in our two counties, that kind of enthusiasm at the really high level. And then it just seems like it causes some, what I heard from Karen and from you was that having these meetings have been some barrier busting going on. Mm-hmm. And we're not, my impression about at least Corvallis is barrier busting isn't our strength, that we're caught up in a lot of, this is what the code says, this is what this says, this is what that says. And it forgets that there are people at the end of this that are right while we're talking on the streets, either dying or starving or freezing or sweating. And we're talking about, well, we have to go through this process. And it seems like, I don't know how you get that larger sense of urgency that sometimes you just make a decision and then you go back and fix the issues, because there are just a lot of tragedies going on in our city that are not being, it's hard for me to hear a council person or a city manager or anybody say, well, we have to go through we have this process and we have to do this and we have to do that. And meanwhile, people are, there are people at the other end of that.
We still have, I think, we, of course, now that I live in Lincoln County is the best. But but I think in this moment, you know, and from a outside inside perspective, you have fairly robust participation and representation in this group that I was listening to your introductions, and you've got Nancy, for example, representing those rural areas. You've got Catherine in there. You've got Charles in there. You've got very strong representation. The thing that we don't have in our group that I would criticize is we really don't have the service providers. So you've got that where we don't. The other thing that I think is uniquely different about the coast, and I hadn't realized it, having moved from Philomath 38 miles over to Newport, that is this is a different world, and we are rural. We are rural. I had to go to the hospital and they had to drive me to Albany. It is it's not the same. Our population base is much different. So all of the towns, you know, Lincoln City and Newport being our biggest towns, they're both population under 10,000. They're not Corvallis, they're not Albany. And in the role of Lincoln County, they are a centralizing force. So the county is actually the player here. The county is the one that is really mobilizing the effort, and before I got here had coordinated the intergovernmental agreement and brought everybody together saying, hey, our resources in this rural space won't cut it unless we work together. So I think it's driven by the understanding that on the rural coastal area, you know, in a lot of ways, we are cut off from the rest of the world. And if we're not going to work together, we're not going to get anywhere. And that's what's driving it. I think in your space, Corvallis and Albany, there are population centers that can drive a larger conversation and can kind of hold the weight, I would say, as long as you do have some representation.
Karen,
It's by need that we have robust participation.
thank you. And I wanted to just debunk a couple of things you asked about, Carol, because Rebecca and I and Nancy went to city council meetings in Monroe, Philomath, Adair, and Albany to really do that outreach and engagement. And I've got to give a lot of credit to Philomath and Monroe. They keep showing up. Chris Workman is attending meetings, and city councilors are attending meetings, and same with Monroe. Steve Martinico and their city councilor have attended and said, we are interested in this. We're not sure what it looks like yet, and we want to know more. We want to collaborate. How is this going to work for our community? And Rebecca and I also went out to Alsea for a community health improvement and planning process meeting, and there were women out in Alsea who were like, "We need more here. My son, when he graduates from high school, I want him to be able to live somewhere, and there's nowhere. And my mother, she can't live with me anymore. There's nowhere for her to live. We want to build out here, and we want to meet our own community needs." So even if they might not be in this meeting, Carol, at the staff level with me and Rebecca and with Nancy, our rural communities are showing up and inviting us to their city council meetings and asking for meetings, wanting to learn more about how the city of Corvallis has leveraged dollars for affordable development. So I want to give them some credit here because that is happening, even if it
Yeah, and
isn't
I was
happening where
not,
you're seeing it.
as I said, I was speaking from ignorance, and I was not denigrating the work that's being done. I had no intention of saying that, you know, you and Catherine and Nancy aren't doing things. I don't hear that information.
Yeah.
And and so I wanted to get the question out so I could get a better understanding, because there are conversations in the league that aren't based on some of this knowledge. And so that there tends to
Maybe
be.
it's time for Rebecca and I to come attend a league meeting and share
Well,
all this great work.
I think I think there's some value to that, but I want to do it when we actually have when the league board is interested.
Yeah,
sure.
But thank you very much for sharing that with me.
Thanks, Carol. Rebecca and I have a couple of updates that we want to make sure to share with you because they're happening in the next month. So we have time for maybe one more question if there are folks who have a question for Karen. And thank you for being here, Karen. It's really
thank you
helpful
for
to know
inviting me.
everything
I
that's
love
going on.
talking.
I hadn't
And
noticed.
anybody who does have questions, or wants to talk more, please, please reach out. If you want my contact information, please reach out. Julie can feel free to share my contact information with anyone. And either if you want to just talk about affordable housing or want to talk about the work of what's happening at the state level, and I'm always looking for people who want to provide input into some of these recommendations moving forward, because it's not meant. I'm a representative of the area. I'm not there to shove my opinion. Well, I am, but I'm there to also do it with informed other opinions. So whoever wants to be in that space, let me know.
Thank you,
And if
Karen.
I just want to say about Karen, we are so fortunate that Karen has taken that role as executive director of the Housing Authority of Lincoln County. She and Donna Holt have such a lovely relationship. Karen jokes, and I don't know that it's a joke, but she says that Donna is on her speed dial. And Donna has stepped up and said, I will help you in any way possible. And with the two of them working in concert across the Tri-County region, that is going to push us forward light years. We have not had that kind of drive in Lincoln County previously.
Thanks,
That's
Peggy.
very nice. Thank you very much, Peggy.
Actually just heard a great update from Lynn Benton Housing Authority when Rebecca and I met with Jennifer Sanders this afternoon, that they are moving forward with a veterans housing project in Lynn County, just down the street from the Housing Authority. Rebecca, was it going to be about 30 units for vets and half with VASH vouchers? There's still a lot of work to have happen, but they're moving forward with it. And if they can make it happen, they will. And that was great news I wanted to share. Okay, well, Karen, you're welcome to stay on. We're going to actually share a little update about 5019, our funding allocation and some upcoming dates, and then a little bit about the House Bill 4123 strategic plan. Rebecca, was there anybody else in the room who wanted to chime in on anything before I move on?
Does not appear so.
Okay, thanks, folks. Round of applause for Karen and Peggy. That was a really great conversation. I learned a lot from both of you. Okay, so we are going to do a pretty brief update. We only have about 15 minutes left, but there is some funding coming to Benton County for emergency shelter going to Unity Shelter and for rehousing to support our community plan implementation. And we also have a brief update about the 4123 5-year strategic plan adoption process. So I'll do this part, Becca, and you can do the 4123. Does that sound good? I can see you when you nod your head. Great, thank you. House Bill 5019 was funding for the rural Oregon continuum of care counties that were not included in that original governor's emergency declaration that got money out for sheltering and rehousing. And so we are lucky in Benton County that Unity Shelter's competitive application for emergency shelter funding, that $1,175,000, not all counties got an emergency shelter allocation, and we did, and it's going to Unity Shelter, and it should be able to support them adding 50 shelter beds across the men's and women's emergency shelter sites. The rest of it falls under the rehousing funding for street outreach, rapid rehousing, data collection, and administration, and we can adjust amounts between those categories if we're finding that we need more in one and less than another, even though we know we need more in all of it. Our goal by June of 2025 is to rehouse 31 individuals or households. We have some milestones to meet. And our first milestone due date is in January. It's been pushed back a little bit because of the funding timeline. Okay, and Becca, I'll hand it over to you. Oh, I will go back because I see a question from Charles.
Sorry for that delay hand there.
No, you're fine.
Just curious, the 50 shelter beds, when referring to Unity Shelter, is that to just reopen the beds that were lost at the men's shelter?
It sure is. The men's shelter location currently isn't open. They have about 25 men staying at the women's shelter location in a co-ed space. And in fact, Ilea, you're here. I will stop talking because you can answer that question better than I can if you're able to.
Yeah, I think the plan would ultimately be to reopen the men's shelter with 50 beds and then keep room at the inn at a 50 bed capacity as well. So that would ultimately be just increasing 25 more beds immediately once we can reopen.
Okay, I assume that was the case. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about that funding? There's a lot of unknowns with that that we will have to figure out this fall and winter as we move forward. So
Who's the we?
Benton County is working with what we're calling a local planning group, and it includes folks from all the providers here on the call. And we had, county behavioral health folks there and community development folks, Faith, Hope, and Charity, a really great group of people that represent, in my opinion, pretty much all the folks who help people in need in Benton County. So it's been really
So it's
incredible to
Benton
see the
County,
coordination.
it's not Hope, it's Benton County.
Correct. Yeah, the Benton County Coordinated Homeless Response Office. So
Right.
my position and Rebecca and Libby coordinating and bringing together service providers. Okay. Any other questions about that? Okay, Becca, I know we don't have a ton of time left, but go for it.
All right, if you could just go to the next slide. Thank you. And just the next slide, we can just dig right in with limited time. All right, so we just wanted to quickly give you an update on the progress we're making to meet the House Bill 4123 requirements as designated by the legislation. It's not simply just trying to meet the requirements, it's building on the work that we've already done in our community and really make a plan that we'll be able to move forward and implement. Just like what Karen was talking about earlier, how this has really been helpful in preparing us for the House Bill 5019 work and how those two things are integrated. And so what we have been doing, when I say we, I mean Julie and I and the rest of the, even Kaylee Olson has been supporting the work to just get the information out to our community, and also the partnerships that were established well before House Bill 4123 through the H.O.P.E Advisory Board, along with staff from service providers and city and county, to start talking about what are we doing in our community right now that fits with the requirements of House Bill 4123, but also moves our own community's goals forward. So we've been working on capturing those stories at all our service provider partners that have work that they've identified for the next 5 years, that there's opportunity for alignment. And so that's been the next step, is interviewing, capturing stories, identifying alignment with the outline that we shared with you in previous H.O.P.E Advisory Board, where we're using the strategic priorities from our update to the 10-year plan as that overarching organization of our work. And so then using that to organize it. Then also the work that we've been doing for the last month or so is understanding how to really set achievable goals in that work, given that there is so much work that needs to happen nearly at the same time to move some of these projects forward and these efforts forward. And so that's taken a lot of thoughtful process and interviewing and questions to our partners, both regional and local. And then as that process, what Julie and I, and I don't mean just Julie and I, but part of that, I can only speak to the work that her and I are doing because we're present doing it. But one of the steps we have done so far is just verifying that we've heard each of the people we've interviewed and service providers right, how we're telling the story in this document that has multiple different purposes, understanding that the scope of this work is spanned over a lot of different disciplines. And so how can we make one unified document that is capable of guiding so many different disciplines and so many different agencies? So that's been a lot of work we've been working on for the last month. Next slide. next process really to speak to that, continuing the conversations we've already started with our policy leaders throughout Benton County. That includes our small communities and our incorporated cities. Really understanding what is the scope and purpose of this document and this work, the coordinated office itself, and the role that policy leaders have in this work. That has been a learning curve for us. We have stepped into some new places as a community around this work, and we need to understand where do we need to adjust moving forward. So that's starting those conversations, and then defining the roles and responsibility. That's really important for us to be effective in our work. We don't want redundancies that then waste resources and put up barriers to the people who really need it, and in a timely, very timely manner too. And then also confirming support, right? We getting and learning from each other, our policy leaders, introducing them to these concepts from a very macro level and a micro level so that they have the ability to provide that support to our community. We also have to document and formalize this as a county. The unique nature of our coordinated office is a little bit different than what we heard about in Lincoln County. And so what roles do we have within the county and our cities to document and formalize this work to really support our community moving forward? So these are the steps that we are going through right now. This really is where we're here for the next month, is talking with our policy leaders and really introducing the draft strategic plan to them, and learning from each other on how we move this work forward. Next slide.
Yeah, and
So
oh, sorry, do you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
I put this together because a lot of the strategic plan stuff, it's at a higher kind of policy planning 5-year level, but at the exact same time, we're working at the implementation level to get funds out the door and to have a community plan for those funds. So implementation with 5019 on the left, and then planning with House Bill 4123 on the right. A lot's happening in October and November. So with 5019, those were those funds for emergency shelter going to Unity and the rehousing funds coming to our community. On October 11th, Rebecca is supporting and coordinating a meeting with multiple different providers in housing and homelessness and supportive services on how do we come up with landlord engagement strategies. Because one of the biggest barriers we heard throughout that process was there's no units. How do we get this person with a voucher into a unit? They're ready for housing. We're hoping for those funds by the end of this fall, so that we can meet our first milestone in January. But until it's in writing and in the bank account, that's subject to change. And then with the strategic plan, Becca, I'll pass this over to you.
All right, so just reiterating what was said before, we have certain dates ahead of us that we've got to meet. One specifically, November 15 is our targeted date to submit our strategic plan to the state. And so the opportunity here is to talk with our policy leaders here in the county to give them the first view of that strategic plan, get any feedback from them specifically around the role that we identify staff and the other components that are administrated by the county in that document. And then as we move from there and we get guidance from that, we will be able to approach the HOPE Executive Committee and understand what types of opportunities there may be to leverage the resource of HOPE Advisory Board throughout our 5-year strategic plan, and generally speaking, our House Bill 4123 implementation.
Thank you. Awesome job. We have just one more update for you all. A reminder that the CARE event is happening in the second week of October. And I sent out this flyer to everybody last month. And the situation table, we have booked the 2-day training for community partners for Thursday and Friday, October 19th and 20th. And that's really for folks who interact with people at risk. Just a reminder that that's going forward. And a reminder of all the ways that you can stay involved with social media, getting a newsletter, and the ways to plug in on the HOPE website. I will stop presenting. We are at 5:59. We have time for one more question. Andrea.
I almost hesitate to bring this up with 1 minute left, but I I have really struggled in the last couple of months with kind of where Hope is going and our goals as a group and looking at our bylaws and the intention of this group. And I know that things are changing because of state legislation and also the, impending organization of the COC, but I have some concerns. So in looking at our bylaws, I feel like if we are going to change the focus of our group and what we're about, that those bylaw changes need to be brought to the group for approval, unless the elected officials, because in the bylaws, it says that our governing bodies have the right to define the scope of our group. If that's something that they determine to do, then that supersedes, our ability to our ability to approve anything. So, that basically changes would be made to this group without anybody in the group having a say on that. Everything that's happening is exciting, but I feel like there needs to be a little bit more accountability on the part of the city and the county, our local government. I kind of feel like we're racing so fast that we need to catch up a little bit and make sure that we're following our bylaws and the guidelines that we have set in place for our group. So I wanted to say that and throw that out there.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about, I don't understand the difference between Julie's job as continuing care and then Julie's job as the Hope Director. And then what our job is in feeding into the continuing, do we have a job? And I don't think it's just a lack of clarity for me. And I'd like to, maybe our next meeting have, Julie will be gone, but maybe Rebecca can just explain what the roles are, because that's why I asked the question about, well, who's we? We's not Hope.
Yeah.
We is Julie in her continuing care hat, not Julie as the Hope person. And that may be perfectly fine, but I just don't understand it. And so I'm not sure what my job is anymore on the board. And that's why I don't have any superpowers.
Well, thank you for the questions. Part of the conversation with the commissioners in October will be to really flesh out some of the questions that you've been asking. So I don't have good answers for you tonight, but I do know that there's every intention to follow up after that conversation with our commissioners to understand their guidance about roles and stuff.
Is $1 million plus a lot of money for just 50 people? Not enough?
It's not enough for 30, for 31 people. And if there is coordination with our vouchers, and if there is a sustainability voucher that comes down from the state, maybe.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, those are all great questions, Andrea. And the ones you sent via email have spurred some of these conversations at the county and why we're coming back to the commissioners for more discussion on these topics. So thank you. I don't have any answers tonight. Anything you wanted to add in the room?
Great, big thank you. Thanks
Yes,
for all the
thank
hard
you.
and all the great work.
Thanks, everybody. You're in great hands while I'm on leave, and I'll see you in December. And thanks for such a fantastic September meeting. I'll go ahead and stop your recording, and have a great night, everyone.
Bye, Karen.
Enjoy your time off, Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peg.
Bye, everybody.